Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Yazan Almasry. I'm a fifth year medical student now. And today we're going to be talking about like a really important topic. It's called the membrane and action potential. And hopefully today, I'll try to make it as simple as possible. At the same time, cover most of what's covered in Dr. Abdul Jabbar's lecture. Should you have any question at any point, let me know, please. Stop me. Don't wait for me to finish the part. It's fine. Just stop me. Will this meeting be uploaded right after it finishes? Hopefully. Hopefully right after. Like I would assume like within by the end of the day, inshallah. All right. So here's what we're gonna talk about. Also, if you see me looking down, I'm gonna be probably using my drawing tablet to cover most of the things, because it's easier to draw things to put into your mind and to your imagination, inshallah. All right. So first of all, do you guys have any background whatsoever about this topic? In the chat, please let me know, or unmute, up to you. Action potential. Yes, yes. Okay. From your pre-med lecture. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll give you just a little background before we start. Okay. Everything that happens in our body is happening through messages that are sent from the brain. Okay. So if you have like a human brain, this is the human, just imagine this is a brain inside the head. Okay. And whatever you want to do, like anything that you ever want to do, it's going to be electrical signals that are being sent from the brain to, for example, to your arm to lift it up. Okay. This does not look like an arm, but bear with me. Okay. So when we say that, when I talk, for example, when I see something, when I touch something, when I feel something, this is all electrical signals that are being sent from the brain to the hand, for example, and from the hand back to the brain. Okay. Now, in medicine, we don't say electrical signal, we say action potential. Okay. So action potential is sort of the message that's being sent from the brain to whatever organ it is, whether it's my mouth speaking right now or my eyes looking at something. Okay, so it's just an electrical signal that's being sent or a message that's being conveyed. Okay, so this is what the term action potential means. Okay, um, so keep that in the back of your mind as we go through so you understand more and more why we're talking about this. Okay, we're all good? Yes, no, yes, chat, please. Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay. Perfect. طيب. So we have something called a nerve cell or a neuron, which is literally the same thing. Nerve cell, neuron, whatever you want to call it, it's the same thing. Okay. Now we know what a nerve cell. I assume by now you know what a nerve cell is. Okay. So what a nerve cell is, remember we said that everything that's happening inside the body is a message that's being conveyed. Okay. So the function of this nerve cell, it's like a conductor. This is where the message starts, and this is where the message is delivered. Okay? So this whole function of this nerve, okay, so what is the function of it? It acts as a conductor. It starts the message. All right? So we need to understand the structure of the nerve cell so we understand how it works. All right? Okay. So we start with this. Okay, so we have this small structure. Okay, and this is called the cell body or the soma. Okay, now I'm saying soma because sometimes the doctor will use soma instead of cell body, but they're literally the same thing again. Okay, now from the cell body, we're gonna have these structures that are coming out of it. Okay, these are the dendrites. Okay, now one thing that I want you to remember about the dendrites, and I'm gonna come back to this again and again, is that when we start the message, it's like a connection. It goes from one neuron to another neuron to the next neuron to the next neuron. All right? So the dendrite is the receiving end. Okay? So this receiving end. Okay? So there will be another neuron here. Okay. It has a signal. Okay. It's going to send a message, or the action potential is going to send it here, and its electrical impulse is going to go to the body. Now, in the body, it's being processed. Okay. The nucleus, we know the nucleus is like the brain of the cell. So it's being processed in the body, and then it will reach this area. Okay. Now, what is this area? It's called the axon hillock. Okay. It's a little bit of a weird name. Just bear with me. Okay. The axon hillock, okay, is the part where this electrical signal, it will come here. Okay. Now, if this message or electrical signal is strong enough, it will say, okay, I need to send this message to the next neuron. Okay. And then to the next neuron, to the next neuron, and then to the brain. Okay. An example for this would be, okay, this is, let's say your hand is here. Okay. Your hand gets hurt, or like someone hit your hand, okay? And it's so painful. So what's going to happen is that there will be an electrical signal coming here. And when someone hits your hand, do you feel it? Obviously, yes. So what happens at the axon hillock? Oh, sorry. My laptop bugging out. 1 second. Okay. So what happens at the axon hillock? The action potential or the message will start and will go through the tail of the nerve or the axon. Okay. Forget about these for now. And then after that, it will go to these things, the axon terminal, and send it to the next neuron. Okay. Now I know this is a lot, so I'm gonna revise it again. Okay. So we start here. There's a message. Someone hits your hand, for example. Okay. Now, if someone hits your hand, there is an electrical activity that happens. This electrical activity will reach the axon hillock. If it's high enough, what's gonna happen? It's gonna go through the tail or the axon to the axon terminal, the axon terminal here, and connect it to the next neuron. The next neuron, electrical activity, axon hillock, if it's high enough, to the next neuron. Does this concept make sense? Yes or no? Is it a bit complicated? Does it make sense? Yes, okay. There's only one person who said yes so far. That means either it's not clear, which it's fine, I'll repeat it. Yes, okay. Okay, I hope people are understanding the concept, okay? So this is the whole concept, okay? It's neuron communicating with each other. You have a neural connection, and then messages going from the body. Like for example, me pinching my hand is gonna go from neuron to another neuron to the another neuron to the other neuron to the neuron to the head, which is the brain, which is also a collection of neurons. Okay. So, and then the brain is gonna process it. Okay. Let's say the brain will say, okay, the object is so painful. So what's gonna happen? My hand will move back, which is also electrical messages being sent back to the hand. This is in the nutshell how our body works. Okay. Now, why am I explaining this? This is really important because everything that happens in our body is through action potential. Okay? Action potential is the message that's being sent throughout the body. Okay? The electrical impulse. Okay? Um, so when we say there is an action potential happening, there is something happening inside the body. Okay? All right. So here it is. Okay, again. Now, if we take a look at this area, okay, and we zoom in, okay, we want to know what's exactly happening. Okay, so there is an electrical potential. This is like an electrical potential. Just bear with me. I don't know why I'm writing a Z, but I guess kind of represents an electrical potential. It reaches here. Okay, this is called the axon terminal, and terminal means the end in English. All right, so this is axon terminal. This thing. Okay, these thing. Do you guys know what a neurotransmitter are, or what a neurotransmitter is? Does anyone know? Did you guys take it yet or no? Any, yes, no? Yeah. Okay. So these are neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters. Okay, wait. Neurotransmitters. Transmitters. Now, neurotransmitters are basically small molecules, okay? Inside this vesicle, okay, it's gonna be released. Okay, these are all neurotransmitters, okay? And it's gonna bind to this, okay? Now, what is this? It's a channel, okay? Now, this channel is waiting for this neurotransmitter to bind to it here. Once it binds to it here, it will open and will allow ions to go through. All right? Which will create electrical activity, moving it to the next neuron and to the next neuron. Okay? Is this good? Does this make sense? Yes, yes. Okay. Perfect. Like, for those who are not understanding, please let me know. I will explain this as many times as it takes. It's fine. Okay. Now the area, whoa. Now the area between two neuron, it's called a synapse. Okay? A synapse simply means junction, two areas coming together. Okay? Now, this neuron or the axon terminal is referred to as presynaptic. Pre means before, so this is before, this is the synapse. Okay? So before it, it's called presynaptic. After it, it's called postsynaptic. So postsynaptic after the synapse, presynaptic is before the synapse. All right. So, so far, this is the nerve structure. Are we all good with the nerve structure? Can I move on to the next concept, or do you guys have any question? If you have any question, ask now. It's fine. We'll repeat. We'll explain again if you want. It's good. It's good. It's good. Either you're lying to me, or I'm really good. So it's good. It's clear. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Play. Um, we're gonna go to the next concept. Okay. Okay, so the next concept is mainly physics related, okay? And for those that don't like physics, take a deep breath. I'm gonna make it as simple as possible, inshallah. Okay? Now, do we agree that inside each cell, say this is a cell, okay? Inside each cell, we have ions, and outside each cell, we have ions as well. Do we agree to that? Do you guys know this or no? Okay, perfect. Now, everything in our body, subhanallah, is created in a way that it's perfect. Okay? What I mean by that is that these ions, they don't just stay inside and they don't just stay outside. They're moving inside and outside. Okay? And when they're moving inside, we call it influx. And when they're moving outside, we call it efflux. An easy way to remember it is influx, moving in, efflux, exiting out. Good? Okay. Now, like I was saying, it's created to perfection, our body. MashaAllah, subhanallah, yani, it's created to perfection. Okay, so ions don't just move haphazardly. There's a system by which they move. Okay, now the movement of ions depends on three things. Okay, number one is the number of channels that are present. Okay, if we have a cell, okay, it's like a closed chamber, and the ions are inside and the ions are outside, and there are no channels, they cannot go out. Okay, on the other hand, if we have a if we have a what? If we have a cell membrane with channels, what's going to happen is that they can move out or they can go in. Okay? So the most important thing, okay, for to begin with, for an ion to move in or out is something called permeability, which depends on the number of channels. Now, permeability is just another way of saying that the membrane is allowing it to go through. Okay? So that's what permeability is. So that's the first thing that's important for the movement of the ion. The second thing, well, the second thing is called the concentration gradient. Okay? Now, the concentration gradient, we're going to come to this again, and electrical gradient, we're going to come to this in the next slide. Okay. So this is the chemical gradient, or in other words, concentration. It's the same thing. Concentration gradient. Okay. طيب. So again, if we take a closed chamber, okay, and this closed chamber has more balls on one side compared to the other side. Okay? Now, we have a barrier in the middle. What's going to happen? Nothing. The balls are going to stay on this side, and these balls will stay on this side. Okay. Now, let's say we remove this barrier. Can someone tell me from the chat what's going to happen to these balls? Where are they going to move? To the right. Okay. So why does it move to the right? From higher to lower. Exactly. Because we have here more concentration, okay, and here less concentration. So when we remove the barrier, this chamber wants to reach a state of equilibrium, okay, or a steady state, okay. It means that it needs to reach a point of equality, basically. Okay, so what's gonna happen is that it's gonna move towards here until we have an equal amount of balls on both sides. And then nothing will happen. Okay? So just like I'm saying here. So this is what concentration gradient. It's the movement from higher concentration gradient to lower concentration gradient. Okay. Now instead of talking about balls, let's talk about ions. Okay? So let's say we have a cell here. Okay? And we have more potassium inside and less potassium outside. Where do you think potassium is going to go? Inside or outside? It's gonna go outside. And what do we call that in terms? I just explained it, like exit for efflux. Excellent. So that's what happens is that it will go outside. Okay, is this clear for everyone? Mm, 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 mm. Okay, perfect. Like, so we talked about permeability, we talked about concentration gradient, and then we have chemical gradient. Did anyone remember what permeability is? Number of channel, yes. Okay. So permeability, again, just to explain it, it's number of channels, or in other words, the ability of the ion to go in or out. Okay, so that's what permeability is. If it's not able, it's not permeable. Okay, the ability of the substance to enter. I guess, yeah, enter or leave. It doesn't have to be just enter. Perfect. طيب. Now, let's talk about electrical potential difference. Okay, now electrical from electricity, potential difference is basically the difference in the electricity. Okay, now by simple physics, okay, if we have a negative ion, okay, and we have a barrier here in the middle, and we have positive charge, okay, what will happen? Nothing will happen. Now, if you remove this barrier, okay, what's going to happen if you have a negative ion and there is a positive field here? What's going to happen? The negative will always go to the positive, okay, just like in magnets, okay? So the negative will move towards the positive, and the positive will move towards the negative, okay? So if we have anions on this side, what's going to happen is that as soon as this we have permeability, what's going to happen? It's going to move towards the outside. Okay, now let's talk about this in terms of the cell. Okay, we have potassium inside, right? And we have potassium outside. Now, if you purely talk about, well, you just purely talk about the electrical potential difference, we know that the cell is negative inside. Okay? I'm going to explain why it's negative, but for now, just bear with me. We know it's like negative 90, for example, or negative 60. Okay? And potassium is a positive ion. Do you think it's going to move inside towards the negative charge or outside towards the positive charge? Inside. Inside? Yes. Inside. For the person that says out, well, you're not entirely wrong, but because we're talking about electrical potential difference only, potassium will move inside. Now, let me explain why is it going to move inside. We said opposite for electrical potential, opposite attracts. Don't mind my spelling. What does that mean? Potassium is a positive ion. Okay? If we have positive charge outside and negative charge inside, it's going to move to the opposite, which is the negative charge. Okay? So that's why it moves inside. Does that make sense? Lean, you got it? Okay, perfect. طيب. So we talked about three things: permeability, electrical difference, chemical gradient. Good? Is everything good so far? Because we're gonna keep building on this concept. Clear? طيب. Now, can you repeat? Yes, of course I can repeat, but which part do you want me to repeat? Okay. So, let me just. طيب. We said that we have two forces by which the ions will move in or out. The first force is concentration gradient, okay, which is moving from higher concentration to lower concentration. Is that good with you? Is that concept good with you? That's the first force. Yes. طيب. The second force is the electrical potential difference. Okay. Now, electrical potential difference says, let's imagine this is our cell. Okay. And we have potassium inside and potassium outside. Okay. And for some reason, I'm going to explain that reason later, the inside of the cell is negatively charged and the outside of the cell is positively charged. Okay. Potassium as an ion, okay, it wants to use the electrical potential difference, okay, as a force, okay? Now this force tells us electrical potential, opposite attracts, okay? So if we have a negatively charged ion, it's going to go to the positive, and if we have a positively charged ion, it's going to go to the negative. So potassium, what does it want to do? Will it go inside towards the negative charge or outside where it's positively charged? Where do you think? Inside. Type. Do you get why? Do you understand why? Because you're right. It's inside. Do you understand why now? Yes. Okay, perfect. طيب. Okay, I hope all is good right now. No worries, no worries. Okay, I hope all is good right now. So, to summarize, ions, يعني we explained from the beginning, we said multiple things, okay? We said that the body convey messages through action potential, okay? And we said these action potential are the electrical impulses going through the nerve cell, okay? And I explained how they go through the nerve cell, but I'm going to explain it again later on, inshallah. So don't worry if you don't remember, okay? Then we explained ions, and we talked about how ions can move in or out, and they depend on three things. Please remember the three things: permeability, concentration gradient, and electrical gradient. Okay? So after that, so now I want to ask, excuse me, I want to ask, why do you think we're talking about ions to begin with? Why do we care about ions if we're talking about electrical activity? It's okay, you can try, even if you're wrong. Charge, okay. You're right, I mean, yes, yes, okay. So in more details, yani basically, these ions are charged. They're either positively charged or negatively charged. So when they move inside the cell, it's going to make the cell more positive, okay? And if the cell becomes more positive, what's going to happen? It's becoming activated. It's going to be able to send the message. You get that? Okay, so movement of the ion is what creates the electrical activity, or in other words, the action potential. So that's why we care about the movement of the ions, okay? Now, there's this term called resting membrane potential, okay? And it's a big term, so let me explain it one by one. Resting, that means, okay, and we're talking about a cell, okay? So whoa, 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 whoa. Okay. Wallah, my computer be tripping today. I don't know what's wrong. Okay, so resting, that means at rest. Okay. So the cell is doing nothing. It's at rest. Okay. Membrane potential, okay, is basically another way of saying the difference between the charge inside the cell versus outside. Okay, let me explain this. Okay. Now let's say this is our cell. Okay. This is our cell, this is our nucleus, okay? There is a charge inside the cell. Why is this charge happening? Because of ions. Okay, so we have a charge inside the cell and we have a charge outside the cell. If some physicist, okay, brings an electrode here, okay, to measure the inside of the cell, an electrode here to measure the outside of the cell. Okay, this is an electrode, which basically is something to measure electricity. Okay, and compares these two together. Okay, we're gonna get something called membrane potential. Okay, so the difference, or this minus this, is the membrane potential. Okay, and this membrane potential is -70 to -90. Okay, some references will say it's -90, some say, well, 65, some say 70. Just remember 70, it's the easiest way. What does this number mean? It means that if we compare the inside of the cell to the outside, the inside of the cell is -60 millivolt, more negative. Okay, so the cell inside the cell is more negative, okay, compared to outside. Does that make sense? So we can say the cell is negatively charged, basically. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Mm, 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 mm. Okay, perfect. طيب. So this is what the resting membrane potential is. Okay, now does it make sense? Because it's really important to understand it before you memorize it. Okay, we all know you can easily memorize resting membrane potential 70 without understanding anything. Okay, but now you have to understand to be like able to recall it. Okay, is it outside versus inside? No, it's inside versus outside. And if it's really hard to remember inside versus outside versus or whatever, just remember that the inside of the cell is negative compared to outside. Okay? So just remember that the inside of the cell is the negative part. Okay? You don't have to remember inside versus outside. I'm just explaining for the sake of completion. Sake of completion. Okay. طيب. So this number is really important. Okay, I made a whole slide just for this number. And if you're gonna remember one of the two numbers, it's -70. Okay, please remember this number. Okay, طيب. Now, again, we talked about ions because they are the ones that make up this number. Okay, so there are three things that make up this number. Okay, and these three things, when we're doing pre-med, I made students hold their fingers up to memorize it. Please, if you're gonna leave this lecture knowing something, it's gonna be this: the resting membrane potential and why we have it, and obviously all of the action potential. Know the whole lecture, but you get what I mean. Like if you're gonna memorize or remember one thing for your exam, this is really important. Okay? طيب. So, what are the three things that make up the -70 number, which is called the resting membrane potential? By the way, for your sake, I'm gonna what's happening. For your sake, resting membrane potential is RMP as well. Okay? Yani just to make it easy, RMP. طيب. The three things are potassium. Okay, let's start from the other order. Potassium, sodium, potassium ATPase. Okay? Potassium, potassium ATPase. Please, please, please remember this. Okay? Now, I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by this, but look, notice how potassium is the largest font, okay? Because it's the most contributing, okay, to the resting membrane potential. Okay, I want you to remember this. This is really important. I'm going to explain this over and over again for the next like 15 to 30 minutes, okay? But so when I say this, okay, we said that resting membrane potential is the electrical difference. So inside the cell is -90 or -70, okay? So when I say potassium is making it this much, okay, what do I mean by that? I'll explain now, okay? So now potassium, I don't know if you guys have been taught this, but it's more present inside the cell versus outside, okay? Let me explain this on the graph and then I'll come back to this, okay? So have way more potassium inside versus outside. طيب. And why does this matter? Does anyone remember what did we talk about the concentration gradients? Potassium is gonna move out. Yay, someone remembers. You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. Okay. Now potassium is gonna move out in one what's it called? In one case. What is that case? We said ions will not move unless there is something. Unless there is concentration gradient and electrical gradient, yes, but there has to be something for them to be able to move in or out. What is that thing? Permeability. Excellent. Channels. Excellent. Excellent, excellent. Okay. طيب. So, what's gonna happen is that potassium is more inside than outside, okay? And you may tend to think that, okay, خلاص, it's just gonna move out and that's it, okay? Yes, but there is more things, okay? So we have anions inside the cell, okay? And anions from your physics class in high school or chemistry class are negatively charged ions, okay? So we have two forces, remember? Concentration gradient and electrical gradient. Now we know for concentration gradient, is potassium gonna move in or out? There is more inside, less outside. Is it gonna move in or out? Let me see this. Out, out. So what do we call that? Efflux. Efflux. Okay. So here it is. Okay. So the first force, we have concentration gradient. Okay. Potassium is going to keep going out through the channels. Okay. And then more and more potassium will be leaving. Okay. Now, anions. Okay. The funny thing about anions is that they cannot leave the cell. There is no channels for anion. So each potassium that leaves is going to leave behind an anion. So what do you think is happening to the inside the cell? It's becoming more or less negatively charged? More. Excellent. So inside of the cell is becoming more negative. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, so it cannot leave. So what's going to happen is that it's going to become more negative. So if we take the second force, a negative charge is building up. The second force, which is the electrical gradient, where do you think potassium is going to move? Inside or outside? Inside, inside. Perfect. Okay. So what's going to happen? Negative charge is building up. So some potassium will go inside, which is influx. Yes. Now, everything is created to like a certain point or to an extent, and each like potassium, so some potassium, so we agreed some potassium will be going in and some potassium will be going out, right? So some potassium will be going through concentration gradient, the other will be going through the electrical gradient, okay? Now, there is a point. Do you guys know what's homeostasis or equilibrium or any of these terms? Balance. Okay. Now, I want you to remember that equilibrium does not mean equal. Absolutely not. Okay? Because if it means equal, it means we'll have equal amount of potassium inside versus outside, which is not reality. Okay? So it's equilibrium, it's a steady state. Okay? So what is the steady state in this case? A steady state in this case when we have equal amount of potassium going out to the potassium going in. طيب? So that's the equal amount. But the potassium inside versus the amount of potassium inside versus the amount of potassium outside, they're not equal to each other. Just the amount entering and the amount leaving. Okay? That means that at any point, okay, let's say now, okay, there are three potassiums are leaving, three potassium will enter. Okay? So nothing is happening to the cell. That's why it's called at rest. Okay? Because if two potassium enter and three potassium leave, there's a charge being made. Okay? Does that concept make sense? We have equal amount entering versus equal amount exiting, so nothing is happening. Good? Maybe I confused you a little, made it hard. I see yes, but I don't know it's now or all good. Okay. Can you repeat? Oh, of course I can repeat. طيب. So we said we have something called equilibrium. Okay? And we said equilibrium means steady state. طيب. Now, in terms of membrane potential, equilibrium is the point at which concentration gradient equals the electrical gradient. Electrical. What does that mean? It means potassium in equals potassium out. Okay? So this is what an equilibrium is. The amount of potassium going in equals the amount of potassium going out. Hello? This is called equilibrium. Okay? And actually it's called, wait, let me see this. So we have two forces, just to revise everything before I go into this. Concentration gradient, and we agreed potassium is more inside than outside. So where is it going to go? It's going to go outside using concentration gradient. Okay. And then using electrical gradient, there is a negative charge being built. So it's going to go back in. Okay. Now, the point at which these two things, number one equals number two, is called equilibrium potential. And I'm going to explain it again. But is it clear for now? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Chat, is it clear? I feel like a streamer, except with brain cells. So only two people replied. Is it clear for the rest? Um, clear, clear, perfect. Okay. Alhamdulillah. طيب. So that's for potassium. So overall, okay, potassium is making, so let's look at the slide again that I just made. Okay, so we said potassium is more inside than outside. Okay, so it would rather go outside. Okay, and some potassium, and I say some because not a lot of potassium go back inside the cell, but some potassium go back into the cell, some. And more potassium goes out. Now, if you have more potassium going out and some potassium going in, and we're leaving behind an ion, what's going to happen to the membrane potential? It's going to become more negative. Okay? Does that make sense? The cell is becoming more negative now. طيب حلو. So that explains the potassium, the part where potassium contributes to the resting membrane potential. We said three things. First of all, it's leaving the cell. And this, when a positive ion leaves the cell, what does it make it? It makes it more negative. And the second thing, it's leaving behind anions. When you have anions, which are negatively charged ions, you're going to have more negative charge. So overall, potassium, what does it do? Makes the cell more negative or more positive? Or let's not say cell, let's say resting membrane potential. Does it make it more negative or more positive? More negative, more negative, more negative. Perfect. Negative. Let me see the chart. Okay, perfect. طيب حلو. So that's for potassium. Let's talk about sodium now. Okay. Now, before we talk about sodium, I want to tell you something about equilibrium potential. Or let's leave it for later. Let's talk about sodium for now. Now, sodium is like kind of the opposite of potassium. Okay. It's more outside than inside. So by concentration gradient, do you think it's going to move inside or outside? Influx inside, perfect. So it's going to move inside. And if it moves inside, what's going to happen to the cell? It's going to become more positive. Okay? So, number one, potassium is making it, we said, it's making it negative. and sodium is making it positive. Okay? طيب. So now we have two things, sodium and potassium. And then we have the third thing. Now, before we move to the third thing, okay, you might be wondering, okay, if potassium is making it negative and sodium is making it positive, why is the number negative? Okay, why shouldn't it be like zero or like in the middle between the two? Why do you think that? It's a difficult question, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, mashallah, someone got it. Yeah, because potassium has more contribution or more permeability, which means we have more channels for potassium. Okay, so that's why I put it in a larger font. Okay, but let's talk about the third force. I don't want to take too much of your time. But which is the sodium potassium ATPase. Okay, do you guys know what an ATPase is? What it is, basically, it's a pump. Okay, so it uses ATP, okay, to open a channel. Okay, what does that mean? It means basically, it will take what's it called? So it will take three potassium from inside the cell to the outside and two sodium back into the cell. Okay, let's see this in a video. It's easier. Okay, so here it is. Okay, here you can see the sodium. I mean three sodium, sorry. It's gonna take them out of the cell and take two potassium inside the cell. Okay, overall, we're having more positive ion leaving the cell than negative ion. So what do you think is gonna happen? The cell is gonna become more negative or less negative? What's happening, man? More negative. Excellent. Okay. And here it is, more negative. Okay. Because we're having three positive and three positive leaving the cell and two positive coming back. So if we subtract two minus three, it will be negative one. So we're creating negative one charge with each movement. Okay. طيب. طيب. What's happening? It does not want to move, man. So my PowerPoint is not responding. For the meanwhile, I'm just going to explain on my hands for now. Okay. So far we talked about resting membrane potential. We said resting membrane potential is at rest when the cell is at rest, and we measure the charge inside the cell. Okay. Now the charge inside the cell, we agreed that it's what number? Can someone tell me what number? Negative 70, negative 70. Excellent. Okay. Now we said three things contribute to the negative 70. What are the three things that contribute to it? Okay. Potassium, sodium, and sodium potassium ATPase. Excellent. Okay. طيب. My PowerPoint is not responding, so let me close it and reopen it. Excuse me for this. I'll be right back, inshallah. But does equilibrium, I'm sorry, but does equilibrium mean that the rate at which potassium goes in and but number of potassium aren't equal? Wait, let me read this again. Means the rate at which potassium in and out is the same, but the number of potassium in. Yes. Okay, so someone is asking, is equilibrium the rate at which potassium in versus potassium out equal, but the amount of potassium inside versus the amount of potassium outside is not equal? Yes, you're correct. That's one way to put it. And yes, you're correct. You're absolutely right. Okay. It's just when we say equilibrium potential, this is exactly what it is. When one equals two, okay, and here it is. I'm going to show you in the next slide. It's called equilibrium potential. When potassium in equal potassium out, okay? But does that mean that the amount of potassium inside the cell equals the amount of potassium outside the cell? Absolutely not. It's just the amount entering and leaving, okay? So when we say that, when we say potassium in versus potassium out equal each other, that means the net potassium equals zero. Okay, that means the amount of potassium is not really changing. Okay, you get why or not? You get what I mean or no? I'm not sure if you got what I mean. When the pump starts to pump potassium. Yeah, yeah. We're talking purely about potassium now. Forget about the pump. I'll explain the pump as well, but forget about the pump. So I'm saying, for example, let's imagine we have 150 millimole of potassium inside the cell and 5 millimole of potassium outside. Okay? Even though potassium in versus potassium out equal each other, the amount of potassium in versus the amount of potassium out is not equal to each other. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. Type. And as for the pump is something else. Okay? The pump is creating more negative charge. Okay? So it's against the concentration gradient, against everything. Okay? But it's there because it wants to, because if we don't have the pump, okay, the charge will stop at some point. Okay? Because if you keep moving the charge in versus out, wait, I'm confusing you, I think. So if you don't have a potassium, sodium, potassium ATPase, what's going to happen is that at some point, we're going to reach a point where the ions are not moving. So the sodium potassium ATPase, yes, it's slightly only contribute to the charge, but it's really important because it will keep the charge moving and moving. Okay? So you don't need to know this. You really don't need to know this, but just know that it's part of the contributing factors to the resting memory potential. Now, equilibrium potential is a really important term. Okay? It's for each ion, there is an equilibrium potential. And we can say that this ion or equilibrium potential, it's the point that the ion is trying to reach. Okay? So each ion will fight to reach the equilibrium potential. For example, potassium will try to reach equilibrium potential. And equilibrium potential is expressed in terms of charge. So if it's negative 90 millivolt, negative 90, potassium will always try to bring the cell towards negative 90. Okay? Sodium, for example, on the other hand, has a positive 60 equilibrium potential, so it will always fight to bring it to 60. Does that make sense? Here it is, okay? So it's the number towards which an ion will fight to reach. For potassium, it's negative 90, and for sodium, it's positive 60. Now, the question is, if it's, and I already asked this, so I spoiled this question. If it's negative 90 for potassium and positive 60 for sodium, why is the resting membrane negative 70? Let's see if you guys remember. Because it's more permeable to potassium. Excellent. So here it is in like a visual way to remember it. If we have this many channels for potassium, we're going to have only one channel for sodium. So what do you think will contribute more to the resting membrane potential? Potassium. Okay? Is everything clear? Perfect. And here it is in a meme format, I guess. So you remember. Potassium is the most contributing to the resting membrane potential. Now, is everything clear so far? Because it's a lot to digest. I know it's a simple yet hard topic, like it's a bit difficult to understand at first, but once you get it, you'll never forget it, inshallah. Is everything clear? Would you guys like to take a break? Yes. What is the equilibrium potential? Yes. So what is the equilibrium potential for sodium? It's positive 60. Okay. So what does that mean? That means the sodium will try to get the cell towards positive 60 millivolt. Okay. So if we have a cell, okay, if we have this like abnormal cell with only channels for sodium and no channels for potassium, so what's going to happen is that the cell becomes positive 60. But that's not a cell that's existing in real life, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. You sure you got it, or you want me to explain again? It's okay, I can explain again if you didn't get it. I hope you got it. Okay. But would you guys like to continue, or should we take a 5 minutes break? We want to have net movement, right? When Yes, absolutely. We want to have net movement, but we're gonna have movement. So net movement means that there is no change, but there is movement. Okay? Continue, continue, continue. Okay, sure. Does anyone know this scene from SpongeBob or no? Does the negative potassium equilibrium mean potassium plus potassium negative potassium equilibrium stuff? No. So someone is asking, does the negative potassium equilibrium potential mean that potassium is leaving the cell? Um, well, you're kind of right. Yes. So, understand this with me, okay? So we have potassium inside the cell and we have potassium outside the cell. Potassium will try to reach its equilibrium potential. Okay, so what's gonna happen is that, let me draw this for you. I'll get a new slide. Let's keep this. Okay, okay. So let's say we have a cell here, okay? And we have channels for potassium, okay? This is potassium channel, okay? And this cell, for example, it starts at 0 millivolt, okay? And we have potassium inside, potassium inside, potassium inside, and potassium inside. Now, and potassium outside, obviously. Now we agreed that equilibrium potential, let's say this is equilibrium potential, equals what, guys? Negative 90 millivolts for potassium. Hello? So what does that mean in terms of ions? It means that potassium, its goal is to bring this zero. Why is it not? Give me one sec. Yeah, its goal to bring this 0 to 90 or negative 90, sorry. Okay, good with me so far? طيب. حلو. And then, so what's going to happen is that we agreed potassium through concentration gradient is going to move out, and through electrical gradient it's going to move in. Now, the amount of potassium at first, since it's 0, the amount of potassium going out is way more than the amount of potassium going in. So there is a huge amount, and it's going to become more negative. It's going to become negative 30 for first, then negative 70. Then we're going to have a point at which the cell, for example, is at negative 90 millivolt. I have potassium inside and potassium outside. Now, at this exact point, when it's 90, the amount of potassium going in equals the amount of potassium going out. Only at this point. At 0 millivolt, for example, it's not equal. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, great. But everyone clear? We can move on to the next concept. Okay, we can move on. But so again, remember the bigger picture. We talked about all of this for what? For action potential. Okay? Now, I want you to remember this. Okay? So for an action potential to happen, we have a sequence. Okay? For instance, we start with the graded potential, and I'm going to come to this, then the threshold, then the action potential. Okay? So what is a graded potential? A graded potential, okay, is so let's say we said the action potential is the message, okay, that's being sent, okay? Now, let's say you're like the mailman, okay? And this is the mail, okay? And we're trying to send message here, okay? And you're like the son, okay? And this is your dad. I cannot draw the rest because Zoom thing is blocking it. But let's say, okay, so this is the message, okay? It's being put in the mail, okay? Now you as the son will go check the mail, okay? And let's say this mail is like a horrible mail about how terrible you are as a student. Are you gonna go and give it to your dad? Yes or no? Absolutely not. Unless you're stupid. Like, come on, who's gonna do that? Okay. So a graded potential is, for example, you get the message, but you don't make an action potential. You don't tell the big boss or the brain. Okay, so there is no action potential. طيب. Now you are the threshold. You are the one who will say, okay, is this worth telling the big boss or is it not? Okay, so we start with a graded potential into a threshold into an action potential. Does that make sense? I just want to put it in an analogy so you can easily get it. Yeah? Okay. طيب. Now, in terms of actual physiology and body physiology, how does that work? Let's say a mosquito, I'm not going to draw a mosquito because I don't know how to. A mosquito is standing on your hand. Okay. 90% of the time you don't sense it. Why do you think it's that? Okay. I'll tell you why. Because yes, you had a graded potential. This graded potential did not reach the threshold. And since that it did not, you did not have an action potential, and the message was not conveyed to the brain, so you didn't sense it. Good? It's interesting, isn't it? And honestly, like, subhanAllah, everything is created to perfection. On the other hand, if someone slams your hand with a hammer, you're gonna reach the threshold, and then you're gonna have action potential, and you're gonna feel pain. Okay, is that concept clear? طيب. حلو. طيب. Let's build up slowly now on the concept. Okay. طيب. So this is in the nutshell how it happens. And we explained this before, but I'm going to explain it again. Okay. We have a stimulus from outside, and we agreed the stimulus could be the hammer. Here it is. It could be the hammer or it could be the mosquito. Okay. This stimulus is going to go here on the dendrites. Remember, these are called dendrites. Okay. Neurotransmitters will be released. Again, neurotransmitters, what do? They bind to an ion channel and open it. And we're going to talk about which ion channel in a bit. Okay. طيب. Then, oh, here it says. Okay, so it opens cation channel. Do you guys know what the term cation mean? Mm-mm-mm. Positive ion, positive ion. So the specific positive ion, let's write it here somewhere. Cation channel allows sodium and calcium inside. Now, if sodium and calcium go inside, the cell becomes more positive or more negative? More positive. Excellent. So neurotransmitters are coming here. They're binding to the channel, the cation channel, okay, opens the cation channel, sodium and calcium will go in more and more. So it's going to create a positive charge. This positive charge is going to move to where? To the axon hillock. Hello? The axon hillock is the sun, remember? It's the one that senses. Is it worth creating a message or is it not? Okay. So now at the axon hillock, we have something that's called a threshold. Okay, just one H. Threshold, okay? If it reaches a threshold, an action potential will be sent, and then will be sent to the next neuron. If not, خلاص, there is no action potential. طيب, حلو. Now, a couple things I want you to keep in mind. Okay, the electrical activity that's happening here. Can you guys see my cursor, like where I'm putting the arrows? Can you see the arrows? Yeah, okay. The action potential that's happening here at the cell body, it's called a graded potential. Hello? It's called a graded potential because it's not a fully action potential. Okay, there is a stimulus from outside, there's neurotransmitter, there's cation channel opening, and there is a charge, yes. But it's a graded potential because some graded potential will become an action potential and some will not. Okay, and we agreed this on the mosquito example. Hello? So the graded potential will move through the cell body all the way to the axon hillock. Remember, axon hillock is very important to remember. And then if there is an action potential, there will be an action potential throughout the axon, all the way to the axon terminal, release neurotransmitters to the next neuron. Next neuron will receive it, and you'll continue the action potential. Is this good? Is this clear? Yep, yep. All right. Everyone clear on this? If someone didn't understand, it's okay. I can repeat one more time. I'm going to repeat it over and over again, and you don't worry about that. But so here is a graded potential. We agreed a graded potential. It's where it's here in the cell body. Okay. So we agreed that there will be like a stimulus. So this is the stimulus from outside. This stimulus will release neurotransmitters. Okay. These are the neurotransmitters. They will open what? What is this called? Does anyone remember? Which channel is this? Cation channel, yes. Cation. So this is the cation channel that will bind the neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitter. Okay. And the cation channel will allow two ions, sodium and calcium. So sodium and calcium will go in and make the cell what? More positive, or make the cell charged, basically. Okay? So it's text. I don't like text. طيب. So this is the first example. Okay? We have a mosquito, which is the stimulus. The mosquito is going to release new. So let's take this in stepwise manner. I don't know what I just said. Okay, so first of all, we have a stimulus. Okay, what do we have after the stimulus? Can someone tell me? And if you don't know, it's okay. Just guess. It's fine. Graded potential. Before we jump into graded potential, yes, you guys are absolutely right. 100% you're right. But I want to like very specifically, we have a stimulus, then we have neurotransmitters released. Then what do we have after neurotransmitters? Which channel open? Cation channel. Then we have a graded potential. And then we have the threshold. Do you guys remember where the threshold is? Let me see. Chat. Axon-Hillock. Yes. Perfect. And then we have action potential if it's higher than the threshold. Okay, let's plot this. So this is the stimulus, number one. This is number one. Where's the neurotransmitter? It's here. Number two. This is number three. Okay? Is this good? I'm trying to explain this over and over again so it gets stuck in your head. Is everyone clear? Now, in this case, what's going to happen? Okay, this is a new graph. Okay, so let me explain it to you. This is the membrane potential, and we agreed, we talked about the membrane potential is what? It's the electrical charge of the cell. There is no resting because something is happening to the cell now. Okay, and this is just time. Okay, so the cell at rest, where is it going to be? -70. And we agreed why, and we explained why. Can someone remind me what are the three things that make up the -70? Sodium, potassium, ATPase. Excellent. But now, nothing is happening here. So look here, nothing is happening, nothing is happening. And here, mosquito comes. Hello? Now the mosquito is gonna create some electrical activity. We said first the stimulus, then we have neurotransmitter, then it binds to cation. So this thing is what? It represents sodium and calcium going in. Okay? Hello? Now, this it's making the cell more positive. See, it's making it less negative or more positive, which is the same thing. Okay. However, it's not reaching the threshold. This is the threshold, -55. So what's going to happen? It's just going to go back to normal as if nothing happened, and you're never going to know that it even happened. Okay? Does that make sense? Mm. Does that make sense? Can you repeat your... Okay, I can repeat. But so we said this graph, just get familiar with it. It's first of all, it's measuring here the cell electricity or the membrane potential. Okay. طيب. Someone else is asking what exactly is a graded potential. طيب. So, first of all, are we good with the graph? Do you understand what's happening here? Like, you know what is a membrane potential, everything? Let me delete everything. Is it clear to you guys? If you don't understand, it's okay. So we understand it slowly. You understand the graph. Okay. طيب. So, first of all, this is the resting membrane potential, RMP. This segment is resting membrane potential. This segment is also resting membrane potential because nothing is happening to the cell. No changes in the electrical activity. Now here we have the stimulus, the one we talked about here, the stimulus, the mosquito. Okay? And we said the mosquito is going to release the neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitter is going to open the channel. The channel is going to let the ions in. The ions are going to make the cell more positive. So it's making it more positive. صح? Is everything clear so far? Okay. طيب. Now, this thing that's happening here in the beginning, right after the stimulus, is called a graded potential. Now, what's the difference between a graded potential and an action potential is that a graded potential will not be an action potential if it does not reach the threshold. So it's kind of like a, remember the example I gave here? Here, let's take two scenarios, okay? In both scenarios, we have graded potential. The first scenario, the message is being put, okay, so this is the stimulus, and you put it here, okay, and we have a graded potential here, okay? Now you are the threshold, okay? So there will always be a graded potential, okay? Whatever the stimulus is, there is always a graded potential. طيب? You are the threshold. You could either reach the threshold and have an action potential, or not reach the threshold and just go back to normal as if nothing happened. Okay, act like stupid. You tear the letter apart and no one will know what ever happened. Okay, hello. Now, in terms of action potential, the mosquito example, you will have a graded potential, yes, but what's going to happen is that it's not going to reach the threshold. And since it does not reach the threshold, it's just going to go back to normal and you'll not have the action potential and everything is back to normal. Hello? So that's what graded potential is. It's the stimulus, it's the electrical activity that's created by the graded it's the electrical activity that's created by the stimulus. Whether it causes an action potential or it does not, it does not matter. It will always be called a graded potential. Some graded potential will create an action potential, some graded potential will not. Hello? Is everything clear? Good. Okay. So that's the first example. The second example is when someone hits your hand with a hammer. So can someone tell me the steps? What's the first step? Stimulus. The second step, neurotransmitters. Third step, oops, cation channels. Fourth step, graded potential. Okay. Fifth step, threshold. Last step, action potential. Excellent. Excellent, excellent. But so here it is. Okay, so we have resting membrane potential here, and we agreed on this. Hello. Then we have a stimulus here, and we said this stimulus is what? Someone hitting hammer. Do you think someone is gonna sense if he's hit by a hammer? Obviously. And it does not need a question. it creates a huge graded potential. Okay? Now, another thing that I want you to know is that when we have a stimulus, okay, why some stimulus can create a huge graded potential and others won't, okay? When we have a stimulus, okay, it will release a neurotransmitter. Now, a huge stimulus, like getting hit by a hammer, will release more neurotransmitters, okay, which will open more cation channels. So what do you think will happen to the cell? Become more positive or less? More positive. Yes. On the other hand, if we have the mosquito example, we're going to have less neurotransmitters, less channels, and you get the point. So you get why, like now, a graded potential, for example, by a hammer is much larger and will reach the threshold. Yes or no? Because we have more neurotransmitter, more cation channel opening, more positive. Okay? And more positive, it get closer to the threshold. Hello? 1 second. Okay. طيب. طيب. Now, I want to explain the main concept of this lecture, which is the action potential. Is everything clear so far? Yes, no, yes, no. Yep, okay. Can I take like a 3 minute break? I want to use the bathroom, so I'll be right back. 3 minutes. So I'll see you guys in 3 minutes. All right, so I'm back. Okay, so now we're going to explain the bulk of the lecture, which is action potential. Okay, again, what did we say about action potential? It's the message that the body is trying to convey. Okay, if you feel something, hear something, see something, think about something, what I'm saying right now, it's all action potential. Okay? Like now, so an action potential, here it is, the technical term. It's a rapid sequence of changes in the voltage of across the membrane. Okay? So in other words, it's basically when the cell rapidly becomes positive, sends the message, and then becomes negative again. Okay, so that's an action potential. Now, I want you to know like some three terms that are really important because we cannot say less negative, more positive, and so on. We have to like say it in like a medical term to make our life harder. Okay, so polarization means negative. So depolarization means less negative. So when we say deactivate, we're saying less activated, right? Same thing here. Whatever this is written here. Yeah. So depolarization, less negative. Repolarization, it means negative again, just like reactivation, you're activating again. Hyperpolarization, more negative, just like hyperactive people, they're more active. Okay? Does that make sense? Are these terms clear? Okay. طيب. So here is what the action potential is in like a full picture. Okay, this picture I'm sure you've seen it a lot. Okay, in this graph I mean. So we start here. Okay, this segment is what? The resting membrane potential. Okay, and then we have a stimulus, and then we said, what is this called? Does anyone remember what this is called? Does, does anyone remember, please? Graded potential. Excellent. And this whole thing after is called an action potential. Okay? طيب. Now let's see the exact steps for action potential. Okay, there are multiple steps. طيب. So the first one is the resting membrane potential, and we agreed this black box is the resting membrane potential. Now, what is contributing? What are the three things that are contributing to the resting membrane potential? You guys still remember? Let's see if I'm a good tutor. Sodium, potassium, sodium. Yeah, for the person saying potassium, yes, it's the huge most contributor, but whenever you ask, mention all three things. Okay, and if they ask what's the most contributing, it's absolutely potassium. You're right. Okay, type good. So that's part one, and we know that. Okay, now part two, graded potential, but I don't want to show it in the slides. So what contributing to the graded potential? Which channels that are opening are contributing to the graded potential? Do you guys remember? Cation, cation, cation. Excellent. So the cation channel, ligand gated. Do you guys know what the term ligand gated mean? So ligand gated means that the channel is closed. Okay, yeah. So gated means the channel is closed. It will only open if there is a ligand, which is the neurotransmitters in this case, binding to it, and then it opens. Otherwise, it will stay closed no matter what. Okay, so the neurotransmitters bind, it opens. So that's what ligand gated is. Hello? طيب. So it creates a little depolarization. We said if it's enough and reaches the threshold, what's going to happen? An action potential. طيب. Then we have a phase of depolarization. Do you guys remember what depolarization means? Less negative, okay? And if we say less negative, does it mean more or less positive? More positive. Someone said more negative. Okay. Yes, it's more positive, but someone said more negative. Again, remember, polarized means negative. Depolarized, if you ever forget, it's fine if you forget because we're a human being. الإنسان من النسيان يعني أصلا. D is for, let's say deactivated. That means is it less activated or more activated? Less activated. So depolarization, is it less negative or more negative? Less negative. Okay. Does that make sense? For the person who said more negative, yeah, it's okay. But I'm just trying to explain so you remember it. You never forget it. Okay. طيب. So if we reach the threshold, and we said the threshold is negative 55, remember that number, it's really important. Okay. We're gonna have depolarization, okay, which is making the cell less negative. Now, how does the cell know? Okay, خلاص, once we reach the threshold, we're gonna send a message. Okay, because at negative 55 exactly, there are channels that are sensitive. There are channels that are sensitive to electricity. Okay, these channels are called voltage gated. Okay, voltage gated, it means that once you reach a specific voltage, these channels will open. In this case, negative 55. طيب. So we have a sodium voltage gated channel. So once we reach negative 55, which is in other words the threshold, what's going to happen is that voltage gated sodium channels open. And then from what we learned, does sodium like to go in or out? In. Okay, so sodium likes to go in, so we're gonna have sodium influx. And since sodium is positive, what's gonna happen to the cell? Depolarized or hyperpolarized? Depolarized. Excellent, excellent. And to revise why sodium likes to go in, because we said the equilibrium potential of sodium equals positive 60. So it's gonna try to reach positive 60. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. And here it is, actually. This is how it looks like. So we have the channel. It's closed. So now the voltage gated sodium channel is closed at negative 70 because it needs to reach negative 55 to open. As soon as you reach negative 55, it opens. Okay? Now, here's the thing. It will stay open until it reaches positive 30. Now, voltage gated sodium channels or voltage gated channels in general, okay, they are voltage gated, as in they open at a certain voltage and they close at a certain voltage. Hello? So they are active or they're open at negative 55 and they're inactivated at positive 30. So it will keep allowing sodium in until it reaches positive 30, then it gets inactivated, okay? And notice I'm saying inactivated instead of closed, because there is a difference. Yes, negative 55 is the threshold for the opening of voltage gated sodium channel. Yes, and remember that number. It's really important to remember it as well. Okay, so we have a closed voltage gated sodium channel, we have an open voltage gated sodium channel, and we have inactivated. Now, what's the difference between closed and inactivated? Is that closed can be open. So let me write this. Closed, inactivated cannot be open. Okay, let me explain this. So, since we don't want a lot of action potentials just happening at once and the channels are keep opening and closing haphazardly, we have something called inactivation. And this thing is basically inactivation gate. Now it's closed. Look how it's closed. It's just going to open and let sodium in. When it gets inactivated, this inactivation gate is only going to open once it becomes closed again, which is at negative 70. This is a bit complicated, but I want you to remember two things out of this slide. Okay? The sodium voltage gate channel opens at negative 55 and is inactivated at positive 30. And actually, one more thing to remember is that when it's inactivated, it absolutely cannot be open. And I'm going to explain later on why this is important. Okay, is this clear? Is everyone else clear? Okay, perfect. I'm sorry for asking a lot. Is it clear? Is it clear? I'm just making sure everyone understands. So again, this is activation gate. This is an activation. And here it is in the graph. You can take a look at it later on. It's fine. But then, then we have this phase, okay, which is what the cell is becoming negative again. So what is that called? Repolarization. Hello? طيب. Now two things are happening here. The first thing is that once it reaches positive 30, what did we say is going to happen to the voltage gate sodium channel? Inactive. I'm so happy you said inactive, not closed, because there's a huge difference. Okay, inactive. Okay, and then another channel will open. What's that channel? It's the slow voltage gated potassium channel. Okay, so potassium again likes to be makes the cell more negative or less negative? More negative. So it will try to bring the cell to which number? Do you guys remember which number? Equilibrium potential for potassium? Negative 90. Excellent. So I'll try to bring it to negative 90 millivolt. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. طيب. So two things are happening. The first thing is that the sodium voltage gated channel are becoming inactivated, and the second thing is that we have slow voltage gated potassium channel. Now it's called slow because number one, they're slow to open, and number two, they're slow to close. That means they will stay open for even later. Okay, so and I'll explain this in a bit. Just wait. So here it is. Okay. As you can see, this is the voltage gated potassium channel. We'll open and then we'll let potassium go inside or outside. Outside. Okay. Excellent. طيب. Now the same voltage gated channel, we said it's slow to close. So what's going to happen is that we're going to have something called hyperpolarization. Hyperpolarization means making the cell more negative or less negative? More negative. Excellent. So, and then again, just like the voltage sodium gated channel is going to close, and then we're going to go back to the now normal resting membrane potential. Okay. Now I want to put it all together because I know it's a bit it's not is not slow leaky so it's slow leaky potassium channel the one that makes it hypervolemic. Um, so it is slow voltage gated channels. The one that make it what's it called? The one that make it hyperpolarized. It's called slow voltage gated channel, and this is the one that makes it hyperpolarized. The leaky channel, I have them summarized for you guys. Yeah, I have them summarized for you here, by the way. Like in case like later on you want to see them. Okay? Does that make sense for now? The leaky channels are the normal channel that are present that allow the potassium to go in and out at resting membrane potential. They're not the voltage gated. They're responsible for the resting membrane potential. Okay? Okay. حلو. طيب. So let's go again step by step. طيب. We start with what? First of all, resting membrane potential. Then we have a stimulus creating a graded potential. We agreed the graded potential is by what? Cation channels. Then we have at the threshold, -55, which channel open? The sodium voltage gated channel. Then at point 4, two things are happening. The sodium voltage gated channel is becoming inactivated, and the potassium voltage gated channels are becoming active or open. So we have this repolarization phase because of the potassium voltage gated channel, and it will become hyperpolarized. Why? Because they're slow to close. Then we have again resting membrane potential. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Excellent. Is everything clear so far? So now, like we agreed, this neuron already accepted the action potential and created an action potential here. Is going to propagate the action potential. Propagate means move, by the way. So it's going to move the action potential all the way to the axon terminal. And then at the axon terminal, it will release these things. What are these things? Can you guess? Neurotransmitters, yes. And this neurotransmitter will bind to this channel. Can you guess what channel is this? Cation channel. Excellent. Now, for the neurotransmitters to be released, how is how is the neuron gonna know is it to be released or not? We have something that is called voltage gated calcium channel. Okay. Now, voltage gated calcium channel is gonna we have an electrical activity happening in the membrane. Okay, it's gonna reach here. It's gonna be sensed by the calcium channel, which allows calcium in. Once calcium is here, it will allow these neurotransmitters to be released. Okay. يعني neurotransmitter are not هيك يعني released by luck. Okay, they're not just released by luck. No, there is a voltage gated calcium channel which will open once the membrane is activated in an action potential, which will open the channel, allow calcium in. Calcium will let the neurotransmitters to be released. Okay, and this is how basically it sends the message to another neuron, and then from another neuron to another neuron, and you get the point. Is that clear? Okay. حلو. طيب, we have something, okay, this is one of the last two concepts, or maybe three, we'll see, called refractory periods, okay? Refractory period is basically a period where action potential cannot happen, okay? That absolutely cannot happen. Why? Because if you already have an action potential from someone pinching your hand, you cannot keep having action potential, you know? Like, you're gonna keep feeling it, yes, but you're not gonna have action potential, action potential. No, there's one action potential and keep sending it to the brain. Okay? Hello? So there is a refractory period, okay? And this refractory period is divided into one of two: absolute refractory period and relative refractory period. طيب. We said refractory period is the period where we cannot have another action potential. So absolute refractory period, from the name absolute, we cannot absolutely have no action potential. No matter what happens, you cannot have an action potential. And then we have a relative refractory period, which means we can have an action potential, but it's way harder to have it. Okay? Now I'm going to explain more. Now this highlighted in red is the absolute refractory period. Remember here at this point, when I said the voltage gated sodium channel is inactive, okay? So since it's inactive and will become active here again, this whole period, okay, where the channel is active, channel is inactive, you cannot have an action potential, because if you have an action potential, you need the sodium voltage gated channel. So if it's inactivated, how can you have it? You cannot. Okay, so you cannot have an action potential at that point. Okay. On the other hand, this is the absolute refractory period. On the green area, it's a relative refractory period. Why is it called relative? Because you can see the membrane potential is more negative. So it's going to be harder. You're going to have a stimulus that's going to take it from here all the way to here, to the threshold. If that happens, you're going to have an action potential. But you see how much harder it is? That's why it's called the relative refractory period. Okay? Does that make sense? Yes or no? When does a refractory period begin? From the point that the stimulus happens, or like from the point that the cell is activated. Okay. طيب. So why do we have the refractory period? Is that because the action potential is going like this, and we have one voltage gated sodium channel open here, then it opens another, then it opens another, then it opens another. If we have this voltage sodium gated channel opening, and then at the same time, because of the electrical activity opening again, the action potential is going to go in both ways, and you don't want that. So you want it to go only in one way. So everything is created to perfection again. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I want you to keep that concept in your mind. The axon, when does actually so here it starts here, like as you see in the graph, it starts here from the red box. The red box, this is absolute, and the relative box is the relative. Okay, and you want exact time or what exactly? This is yani how it is. You just need to understand the concept, not the exact timing of it happening. Like you need to understand the absolute refractory period happens because of voltage gated sodium channel, and relative happens because of the slow voltage gated channels, slow potassium voltage gated channel. Okay? طيب. Hmm. Okay, and this is just a summary for you guys to read later. Okay, now there's one concept that I want you guys to understand. Which voltage sodium is, well, I don't understand. What does that mean? You mean which is which? Okay. So relative refractory period, absolute refractory period is when we have inactivation, not closer, inactivation, sodium voltage gated channel. And relative is because of the slow voltage potassium channel. And I have them here summarized for you in the table as well. Happens here, difficult, inactivated, no conduction. Good? All good? Okay. Like, there is one concept that I want you to understand. If this is the neuron, okay, this is a cell body of a neuron. Let me draw this real quick. Uh, uh, if you have an axon here, okay, okay. So what I'm trying to explain is that we have an action potential that begins here, and we agreed that it happens because of what? The voltage-gated sodium channel. Okay. However, some might think, and خلاص, once it starts here, it's gonna go all the way. But that's not true. Yani it needs to be keep activating. So it's gonna be active, 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 and it's gonna reach here. And then once it reaches here, becomes activated again, activates the sodium voltage-gated channel again. And then comes here and then activates the voltage-gated sodium channel again. And then comes here and activates all the way until it reaches the neurotransmitter, activates the calcium voltage-gated channel, release neurotransmitter, send it to the next one. Okay? So it's not just one at the axon helix, it's multiple in a sequential order. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So why am I telling you this? We have something called saltatory conduction. Okay, so there is something that is called myelin sheath. Okay, so this thing is called myelin sheath or the white matter. Okay, it's not very white in this diagram, but it's white. And it's made by Schwann cells. Schwann cells are the ones that create the myelin. Okay, now what is a myelin? Myelin is an insulator. Just like in an electrical cable, there is an insulator that does not allow the electricity to leave. We have myelin sheath. Okay? طيب. I'm going to explain how is this important. Well, okay. And we have this is so this is myelin sheath, and the area between each two myelin sheath is called node of Ranvier. Okay? So we have two things here. Myelin sheath, node of Ranvier, myelin sheath, node of Ranvier, myelin sheath, node of Ranvier, and you get the point. Okay? So why do we need an insulator? Okay, just like in electricity, insulator will make the action potential faster and less electricity loss. So it makes the process more efficient, in other words. Okay? Okay? So this is why we need a myelin sheath. Okay? So the way it works is that instead of going like this, the action potential normally in a myelinated axon will move like this. Instead of going like this, it's gonna move like this. It's gonna jump from one node of Ranvier to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other until it reaches the end, which is way faster. Okay? This movement is known as a saltatory conduction. This jumping from one node of Ranvier to the other is known as a saltatory conduction. Okay? And here it is in the diagram. This is action membrane. Okay, so here it is. It's going to activate the voltage gated channel. It's going to activate it again and again and again because the heat keeps being lost. So it needs to activate it again and then again and then again. This is in myelinated. In a myelinated, since it insulates the heat, it can go for longer. It jumps from here all the way to here and then all the way to here. Okay, so it's much faster. Okay, so that's why a myelinated axon is much faster than an unmyelinated. And here you can see the saltatory conduction. Does that make sense? Yep, yep, yep. Okay. طيب. Oh wait. Just a stupid video. I'll put it to remember. Look how much faster it is in the myelin sheath compared to the normal one. Okay. Okay, we already talked about this. Okay, so this is the last concept that I want to talk about because multiple students from pre-med asked me about this. I don't know if Ibrahim is here, but was one of them. But yeah. Anyways, hyperkalemia, hypokalemia, what do you need to know and what do you need to remember about this? Okay, it's a complicated concept. It's not very simple. For your level, what you need to know is that normal kalemia, you know what normal kalemia means? It means normal level of potassium. Kalemia means potassium. Okay? Normal means normal. So in normal situation, we're gonna have the normal action potential. Nothing is different. Hello? Now, hyperkalemia, hyper means what? More. So more potassium. We have more potassium in the blood of the patient for some reason. Okay? طيب. So what happens is that since we have more potassium, the cell is going to become closer to the threshold. So if it becomes closer to the threshold, do you think it's going to be easier to make an action potential or harder? Easier, yes, exactly. On the other hand, hypokalemia is going to do the opposite. It's going to hyperpolarize the cell, so it's going to make it harder to make an action potential. So that's all you need to remember. Some of students are looking up a question for this, and it says like the cell becomes weaker or something. In both cases, it's gonna become weaker, and you're gonna have twitches. So it's not really something to keep in mind. Oh, you have more excitability, so you're. It's complicated. It's not that easy. Okay, so just remember this one fact. It's easier to have an action potential in hyperkalemia, and harder to have an action potential in hypokalemia. I could go into the physiology of it, but I don't want to complicate things. All right. Any questions? I think that's it for me. Let me check. Yeah, that's it. Do you guys have any questions? Mm-mm-mm. Did you understand everything? Be honest. It's okay. We have time to like all good. Um, Everyone else, is it okay? Did you guys understand? Did you find difficulty? If no one has any question, yeah, you can pause the recording.